Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Ask Me Anything, which is just the newer, cooler name for a Q&A session. My name is Tiago Forte, and I will be answering any and all questions to the very best of my ability for the next hour, preferably related to my product, my course, which is called Building a Second Brain. Probably, I'm sure all of you know what that is, but just in case someone doesn't, there's the website in the chat. I'd love to hear where y'all are from. If you wouldn't mind putting in the chat the city or state or country where you're calling in from, I'd appreciate that. We have Atlanta, Germany, Würzburg, I think it's pronounced, Boulder, France, Paris, Texas, Madrid, Columbus, Ohio. Very cool. I always just love seeing the diverse places we end up with on these Zoom calls. Menlo Park, Switzerland, Wisconsin, Israel. Cool. Real quick Zoom orientation for those of you that don't know it. I highly encourage you to be active in the chat. I don't expect this to be exclusively a one-way broadcast. In fact, this call especially should be interactive. So if you hit the chat button in the toolbar, the Zoom toolbar, this window will come up, and feel free to drop in questions, concerns, links to things, references, websites, anything you want. And that's always entertaining looking there. I'll probably hide it when I'm speaking because it's kind of distracting. But every few minutes, every 5-10 minutes, I'll check in there and see if there's any questions I can answer. Last thing is, if there's any possible way you can turn on your camera. I don't like running your typical webinar where it's just a bunch of blank faces. I really expect to interact with you. So please turn on your camera, even if it's on a smartphone, so I can see your beautiful faces. And remember that I'm talking to real humans. So really, this call is for you. For once, I don't have a detailed agenda that I'm going to walk through, no slides, unless you want to see the slides. But in general, I have open here the different kind of platforms that we use in the course. And I would love to just show you any of it. I'll also do, probably in the second half of the call, a little guided tour where I'll show you kind of the main places that we work in. But let's go for it. Who wants to be the first brave soul? I'd love for you. We have a small enough group that you could just unmute yourself and tell me what you want to know. Tell me what questions I can help you with. Who wants to break the ice?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Is that Kanisha?
Yes, I'm sorry. Is it echoing?
Yeah, let me see.
Oh, it's not you. Let me do this. I'm on twice, so you won't. Is that better?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, yes, I'm sorry. I had to join twice because my computer's weird. So you can't see me while I'm asking the question, but I wanted to ask you about tacking on. You had two courses. Obviously, you have Building a Second Brain, and then you have another course that's kind of, I don't know what to call it. I'm not on your website, but it's like how to manage yourself and manage your day as an entrepreneur. It's a smaller course. Do you recommend taking one of those before the other?
Yeah, so I think you're referring to the Get Stuff Done Like a Boss course, correct?
What is it called again?
I'll put the link here in the chat. It's called Get Stuff Done Like a Boss.
That's the one, yes.
Cool, yeah. Yeah, great question. And the bonus that I sent out yesterday, I'm doing one bonus for each day for these last 3 days.
Okay.
I'm including that in all purchases of Building a Second Brain for anyone who's purchased the past couple weeks up until tomorrow. Gotcha. And basically that was the first course I did. It's been 6 years now. It's the very first project I did being self-employed, and it really just teaches you using really simple step-by-step screen share videos, how to set up a task manager. A task manager is a program that's like a digital to-do list. So whereas your second brain is like not really immediately actionable things, ideas, notes, files, references, resources, theories, all that kind of stuff, bookmarks, websites, your task manager, your digital to-do list is anything that's actionable. So the things you have to do now and in the near future. That's the really, really clear distinction between those two things. And they're so different that I have different courses that address them.
Gotcha, gotcha. Because they both sounded like something I needed, but I was like, okay, do I need to start with building a second brain or, okay, so they're going to be bundled together. So that's good. Okay.
Yeah,
That answers my
for the
question.
sequencing, you can really do it both ways. I've seen success in many different things. Sometimes I think it has to do with people's kind of psychology, their learning style, different things. But some people like to start at the end and then work backwards. Some people like to start at
Okay.
the very beginning and work forwards.
Gotcha. 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 Gotcha.
But let
Okay.
me,
That makes, mhm.
yeah, sorry to interrupt, but let me just show you kind of. So this is the Academy homepage. The Academy is our online school. And these are really like the 3 featured courses. They're actually reverse order, but this is Get Stuff Done is really your actionable, your workflow, your tasks, your to-do list. Then we built on that. Really, we developed each course listening to the needs of the people that had completed the previous one.
Okay.
So people do Get Stuff Done. They go, okay, now my to-do list is awesome. What about my notes? And that's where Building a Second Brain came from, which is all about
Okay. Gotcha.
notes. But then people finished Building a Second Brain and we're like, well, now I have all these awesome notes. What do I do with them? And then we developed Write a Passage, which is about using your notes for writing.
Right. Which I learned about that one yesterday in your session yesterday.
Totally.
Okay. And then, so I didn't see the bonuses yesterday. I don't know. I just make sure it's not my spam. But what if I sign up for Building a Second Brain, which I was just going to sign up for it yesterday? Well, I won't miss any of the perks, will I?
No. My general philosophy is I do everything humanly possible to reward early action and especially not to punish it. Right. So this is productivity. I don't want to like train you to procrastinate.
Good point.
That would be the opposite. Okay. I would not be doing my job if I did that.
No. Excellent. Okay. Yeah. I was going to sign up anyway. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. And then I did love that other course and wanted to just find out about when to tack that on. But I'm glad to know it's a part of the Building a Second Brain purchase. So that's good for my pocket. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. You know, I hesitated a bit. In general, I'm a bit wary of bonuses. This might be the first time I've ever offered like a bonus because it's like, you know, courses are not like other kinds of products. You know, it's not like going to Walmart where it's just like the more the better. Pile on this and pile on that and pile on that. The scarce thing with learning is your time. And adding more courses on the top doesn't give you more time. It actually makes the problem worse. So I was a bit hesitant, but so first, the bonus going out today is going to have to do with that. So I don't want to announce it yet, but I'm going to be helping you with that course, with the Get Stuff Done course. I'm going to be essentially delivering it live. So there's that. And also you have so much time now. Between now and the end of March, which is when the Building a Second Brain cohort starts, Get Stuff Done is way easier. It's just shorter, more straightforward, simpler. It's based on a best-selling methodology called Getting Things Done. So I didn't have to do all the figuring out of all the concepts. It's just like I'm delivering the methodology to you. So I feel like that's much more feasible to do on your own, whereas Building a Second Brain is much more expansive. It's really looking at a much bigger picture of your professional life. And that's why we do it in a cohort.
Gotcha. Okay. Sounds good. I think that's all the questions I have. So if I have something else, I'll raise my hand.
Cool. Thanks for breaking the ice,
okay.
Nisha.
No problem.
I'd say I'll go.
Yeah.
Michael here. I've been really fascinated in your evolution with Notion. And so I'm curious about in the new course, to what extent you'll be featuring Notion as part of a second brain system.
Yeah, I knew I was going to get this question.
Of course.
Yeah, so this is good. It's a very interesting time. We live in interesting times in the productivity software world. It's funny. I have a series of meetups, of free local meetups that I'm organizing with Notion. The first one was just last night. So I just gave a presentation, like a 30-minute presentation on this topic last night for the first time. But I think, let me try to summarize here. We're pretty clearly at the changing of the guard, right? There's a new generation of productivity software. It's sometimes referred to as the no-code movement. And that the term no code refers to the fact that you're not just like clicking buttons and interacting with a program that someone else has created, but with this new generation of apps, you can actually create interfaces. You can create tables and databases and pages that you can interact with that have this kind of quite higher level of intelligence. But what my talk is largely about is that each new generation of productivity apps, it never completely replaces the previous one. Right? Like the first generation was email, the second generation was task managers, the third generation was digital notes apps, and now we have Notion and Friends. But we still have email. We still have the original kind of killer app in productivity. It never completely replaces everything that came before. So what I'm really trying to explore in my research and in my work right now is I really don't think Notion is going to be the all-in-one productivity app. I don't even think that's a good idea to have an all-in-one app. It's just like one single point of failure. But given that this is a new, very, very exciting generation, what is the ideal use case? What is the problem? What is the hole that's currently missing in our productivity stack that Notion is filling? And I have a hypothesis for that, but it's still in development. But to answer your question more directly, people who go through the course, it's probably a majority Evernote, probably 60%, 50, 60%. But everyone else uses about 24 other apps. I mean, we have I can show you this now. Cool. We have an app directory. So this is the student-only online discussion forum. It's the kind of like town square of everything we do. You can see here, all the discussions, the exercises, questions and answers, course feedback, tips and tricks. And it's super, super active. Some threads have hundreds or thousands of replies. But one thing we have here is the app directory. So this is a listing, and this is all created by students. We didn't create this. Each one of these lines is an app. Most of them note-taking apps, or at least this section note-taking apps. And these links lead to discussions. They don't lead to like the app homepage, which is not very helpful. We have extensive discussions with many, many replies on dozens of different apps that people use in their second brain. So I say this like a broken record, and no, I think people don't ever quite believe me, but this really is not a course about Evernote. We focus on really the fundamentals and the fundamental principles that apply everywhere. And people are building their second brain in Bear, in Notion, in Microsoft OneNote, in Microsoft Word. Some people adopted Microsoft Word in 1987 and like it, and so they're doing it there. That's great. Some people are on paper. We have a student who's, I think, 92 years old. He's like, listen, I've been using paper longer than you've been alive. And I'm going to keep using paper, but he can still use Para. He can still use progressive summarization. He can still use workflow strategies, which I think is way, way cooler than just like how to use X, because software is not predictable. Next year it can get acquired, it can shut down, it can go bankrupt, it can have a data leak, it can get sued by the government. Like there's few things less reliable than productivity software, ironically. So I like to focus on a layer above that. Evernote is just so that I can show you a practical example. But it's interesting, in the onboarding survey, I have a question, what app do you use? And over the past 12 months, Notion went from like 2% to like 22%. And so it's clearly growing a lot. And we're gonna start either pointing people to helpful resources that already exist on Notion, there's more and more of them. Marie Pauline, who's one of the top Notion thought leaders, she has a YouTube video that I highly recommend, which is how to implement my organizational system, which is called Para, in Notion. And so I'm like, why would I recreate that video? So I just tweet out and send out her video. So I don't know if that helps. That was a lot of stuff, but it's a perfectly and quite popular tool to use it with your second brain, I'd say.
Great. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Yeah. And the talk that I'm giving at the Notion meetups, I'll have that, the one in LA, which is on the 30th, we're going to record with a professional video crew. And we're going to post it online on YouTube in about a month or so. So you'll all be able to see that.
Okay.
Let me see if I can find the Marie Pauline's YouTube video. Yeah, here it is. So let me take a look at the chat here. Vincent, what do you mean by visual data management connecting to a database? Oh, so mind maps. Do you mean that I use personally or that we use in the course? Could you clarify that? In the meantime, Mike, you say you have a question? Did you want to unmute yourself and ask?
Oh, yes. Yeah, sorry for not sharing my video. I worked late and I'm not that presentable. Um, the yeah, just a few quick ones. How does a progressive summarization differ from this writing course?
Yeah, sure. So progressive summarization it's a technique for summarizing texts is the clearest way I would say that. And the reason for that is you can take the best notes in the world, so carefully, selected, so lovingly crafted, so carefully saved in your notes. If they're too long, if they're too extensive, they're not actually accessible, right? In the midst of your workday, the notes that I take on books are usually thousands of words long. In the middle of a busy workday with things flying back and forth, I'm not going to stop and spend half an hour reading 5,000, words of notes on a book. So a note has to be, we talk about this concept of glanceability. Unless it's glanceable, you can just look and in a matter of moments get the gist of what it is. It might as well not even exist. So that's what progressive summarization does. But the writing course, which just so everyone knows what we're talking about, is sort of the sequel to Building a Second Brain. It's taught by my business partner, David Perel. I just put the link in the chat. It's really the sequel because once you have all these incredible notes, which you can use for anything, we have video makers, we have people who run workshops, we have people who do business development, who run nonprofits, who are in government, all using their notes. But one of the most popular things you use notes for is writing, just of course, right? So instead of trying to include that in Building a Second Brain, because otherwise it would just infinitely expand to cover everything, we created a separate course which is completely focused on writing in a way that we can't do in Second Brain.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Progressive summarization is really universal. No matter what, even if you never publish a word in your life, you need to have distilled notes. Whereas writing, then David takes that and through some really cool exercises shows you how to sort of specialize that kind of summarization, specifically if you're a writer.
Okay. I had two other very quick questions.
Yeah.
One of which I'd like to ask offline.
Just email me.
Oh, okay. Is your email like in the system somewhere?
Yeah, here's my email in the chat. Especially this week, I usually answer about every other day, but this week I'm constantly in there because I'm getting hundreds of messages from you guys, which is awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the thing people don't get about these courses. We want to hear from you. People are like so timid. They're like, they're going to bother us. But this is why we do cohorts. For those 6 weeks of the cohorts, this is our total focus. It's like all we're doing. And now we're going to have, starting with the cohort in March, we're going to have full-time staff, which is like now the 50% of my time I was spending on random administrative things. I can spend giving feedback. I often create new content. Like in those 6 weeks, the videos I create and the blog posts I publish often are direct responses to questions people have in the course, right? Instead of just giving you a just very bland answer, I can create a post or a template or a guideline or a video that answers it in more depth. So we really love hearing from you. If it has to do with the course, preferably during the cohort.
And very quickly, for a number of reasons, I need to use OneNote instead of Evernote, although I did use Evernote and loved it. I noticed in version 9, you cover OneNote a little bit. Is there any other resources that I can use to apply OneNote to the things in Building a Second Brain?
Yeah, have you seen my OneNote resource guide?
No.
Oh yeah. So it's interesting because I totally get the needing to use OneNote. We do sometimes trainings for corporate clients. We've done government clients. We work for the Inter-American Development Bank, which is a government institution that overlooks the White House. It's like next door to the White House. And so there's crazy security requirements, privacy requirements.
Yep.
regulatory requirements. We've worked with the pharmaceutical industry, and Microsoft is just the go-to company, right? And so we do all our corporate trainings using OneNote. Actually, we had to switch from Evernote to OneNote. So I made this OneNote resource guide, which I just put in the chat, with some of the best resources we found on OneNote. It's not exactly building a second brain exclusively. It's more just like generally useful things. But a lot of people in the courses do use it.
Okay. And my last question is, what is a cohort? Is it this?
I know. I'm trying to find a better word than that. It's kind of a wonky word. It's just a group of people that are learning a topic on the same schedule. So we kick it off. It's going to be, we haven't decided the exact date, but sometime in late March. And then you have a pre-scheduled series of calls. It's going to be 2 calls a week for 6 weeks. So 12 meetings, 12 hours we're going to spend together. A cohort just means you start together, you finish, sometimes not completely together, but around the same time. And you're kind of like you're like a class, like a graduating class.
Okay, but it's different than what we're doing right now.
I mean, this is a pretty good simulation. You know, it's more structured because we'll usually have pre-assigned either reading or video watching, which is the lecture. And then we'll spend the hour of the call kind of like this. People have questions, they share their screen and we look through their workspace. Sometimes they have problems or exceptions, or they can't use this, so they need to use that. It's really, it's closer to like coaching or something, rather than, I don't like spending the Zoom calls lecturing, because why, I'd rather publish a video you can watch on your own time. The value of us being here IRL in real time is that we can interact. Okay.
And my last thing is, like I'm working with some diplomats in my city. One of the things I really want to get them away from is like just being totally, that addiction to constantly checking their email. I think the average statistic is like 77 times a day. And so I went and did a bunch of research on habit stuff, Charles Duhigg's book and James Clear. And I got rid of the environmental, they have like a structure and, cue, reward, anticipation, and anyway, they each have their own structure. I've gotten rid of the environmental stuff. All alerts are off, all pop-ups are off, anything that, triggers that. But the other things of, how do I change the reward? I mean, how do I get rid of the FOMO? Do you get into any of that kind of stuff? Because I'm having trouble. They apply it to, how do I not come into the kitchen and grab the candy bar instead of the apples that are in the refrigerator? But that's quite different than the more esoteric things, like how do I avoid a deep addiction to constantly checking email or that kind of thing.
So I'm probably going to sound like a broken record, but I have a course for that.
Oh my God. Oh, wow. What's that?
I just put it in the chat. It's called Design Your Habits. And I kind of think habits are its own domain, its own thing. I mean, there obviously are cross references between the courses, obviously, but I would say we don't touch on stuff like that so much in this course.
And that habits course, is it something you're working on? Is it purchasable now?
No, it's been out for a few years. It's completely self-paced, just like the Get Stuff Done course. And it really focuses on essentially creating good habits, stopping bad habits, and behavior change.
Okay, and would it cover the more esoteric things rather than like go to the gym and eat right and stuff?
We do. It does definitely has more of a focus on productivity than say like, although we do touch on health and finances and other things too, just because those are great examples. But I would say it is more geared towards productivity.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Good questions. I hope everyone, I mean, those questions were for everyone. Those were very, very common ones. So I hope that was useful for everyone. We have a superhuman question here. Yes, for some people, I recommend it. Superhuman is an email app. It's an app for very efficiently checking your email. It costs $30 a month. I have a post on my blog about it if you search Superhuman. But other than that, it really depends. Like if your performance in email is crucial to your overall performance, then yes. But I'd say that's maybe 5 or 10% of all people. or of all professionals even, and that's not everyone. So check out the post, let's say. Someone else had a question. Dean, did you have a question?
Yeah, I've taken your Getting Stuff Done course. I'm actually friends with Marie Poole, and she lives near me here in British Columbia. So she's helped me with my Notion setup for my business. And that's actually kind of how I found you. But I did the Getting Stuff Done course, which I really like. What's the crossover there? Or is there any, or is Getting Stuff Done just kind of like Para for beginners?
There is a bit of crossover. I mean, you can see when you watch Get Stuff Done, the seeds of the second brain idea. I didn't have that concept at all back then, but Para makes kind of an appearance, and it's many of the same principles, right? Like, you wouldn't want to use completely different principles for actionable and reference information. So definitely some similarities, but also quite distinct. You know, with Get Stuff Done, I'm completely focused on action. What is the succinct, most direct, most clear action? Whereas, you know, when you're taking notes on a book, action is there in the background, but it's not necessarily the most important thing. So there's kind of there's definitely a distinction. You know, since I'm getting a lot of questions on this, I have this model called the digital productivity pyramid that kind of lays out how I think about all these things. It's a little bit nerdy, wonky, not a little bit, it's a lot nerdy, but basically this is kind of the model that's emerged over the last 6 years. Think of this as your stack, your productivity stack. And you have to start at the bottom. You have to build fundamental skills before you start building more advanced ones. And you can see here, I have my courses kind of overlaid. So Get Stuff Done Like a Boss is really about this level 2 task management and workflow. Then on top of that, you build habit formation to make that workflow more systematic. Then on top of that, you build personal knowledge management. And then on top of that, you build project management. So this is kind of the most typical way that I see people advance their skills from bottom to top. So you can see there's kind of a building process, and I'll put this in the chat.
Great. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Of course, thank you. Someone asked about the 2 different tiers. I will put this post. There's a post for everything, I swear. This really explains the difference. This link I put in the chat. Premium edition has essentially 4 additional things. Expert interviews. I think I have 8 of them. Just people who are known for their output or their performance or the quality of their work. I interview them about their second brains. And most of them don't use Evernote. The last one we did was Buster Benson, who is known for a lot of different things. He uses Bear and walks through a very, very cool, very simple way that he uses the note-taking app Bear as a second brain. It's beautiful. Second thing is advanced tutorials. So things that are cool, but are not part of the core stuff you need to know. Things like creative problem solving, visual thinking, note templates, how to take online courses, how to create images, all using the second brain. Third thing is note templates. Fourth thing is a 3-month subscription to Praxis, which is my blog. And by the way, I have a tag on my blog for everything Building a Second Brain related. So if you want to read more, I mean, that's every post, probably more than 50 that I've published related to Building a Second Brain. Some of them are paywalled. I have a monthly subscription program, but most of them are free. So eat your heart out. Does that answer your question? Cool. Oh, and the difference in price between those is currently $200. The 2 tiers are $499 and $699. But after Friday, they're going to both increase to $799 and $1199. So they're both increasing, and the difference between them is getting bigger. The other thing is you can always upgrade later for $100. You pay basically the difference between the 2 tiers plus $100. So if you were to upgrade now, you would pay the difference between the 2 tiers is $200, so you would pay $299. After Friday, the difference is $400, so you would pay $499. If that makes sense. I just like to give a little bit of an incentive to sort of dive in all at once, which I think is helpful, but still give you the option to go at your own pace later. Yeah, let me talk about grandfathering. If for some reason, I can't seem to emphasize this enough. I don't know if it's because other courses don't do this, or it's unusual or something like that. Maybe I'm just not explaining it well, but I really, for me, there's one student body. I think of every person from the very first person who ever took this course to the last as part of one group. So every time that we have a new cohort, most of the people in it tend to be it's like the new class, it's like the freshmen, but then they join the student body, and that student body, all of it, excuse me, is in for life. I treat them, if you purchased 3 years ago, I treat you like you purchased yesterday. So you have access to both all future versions, which I come out with every few months. We're currently on version 9. And you can see what that included. Oops. At this link, the cohort in March is going to be version 10. So I come out with new updates every few months, and every time I do, I email all past students, just telling them what's new. And then you can also join any future cohort. And this has a few interesting implications. So one, sometimes people take it multiple times. A lot of people do, actually. And what they often say is this course is so dense, it's so like insight dense, just like the best books that you read, you don't get everything the first pass. You come back and some people are like, I didn't even hear you say that the first time, or I wasn't ready to implement that the first time, or I'm in a different place and I understand this differently this time. So going through multiple times is awesome. But also you can just drop into certain sessions. So sometimes you get my acronym is CODE, Capture, Organize, Distill, Express. Sometimes you got C and D the first pass, but your O and your E is kind of weak. And you come back, instead of having to do 6 weeks again, which is a lot, you just drop into those specific sessions and you get a refresher. And the other thing I like about this is I love having graduates back, because you guys come back like these wizened elders, and you come back like with such great wisdom and observations of what it's like to work with a second brain after 6 months, after a year, after 2 years, and often say things in a much more eloquent way than I'm able to. So I do everything I can to incentivize people to come back. So really, like, building a second brain, in my mind at least, it's like a lifetime membership you only pay for once. It's like a one-time fee. And then you get a continuous stream of value. And that's really my way of rewarding people. The earlier you buy, the more value and rounds of material you get. And I really plan on doing that for the foreseeable future. So hope that answers that question. Anyone else have anything they want to unmute themselves and ask?
Yeah, I have a question. I raised my hand. I wasn't sure. Is that where we should go to ask a question? Raise a hand?
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that you can raise your hand on Zoom. I just saw that.
Okay, so I wasn't sure whether I should just interrupt and ask, or raise it, or ask in the chat. So maybe you could clarify that first. Is any okay? Or...
Yes, I'm gonna have my eye on the chat, and from now on, I will keep an eye on the hand raises.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So I was just asking. I asked in the chat as well. Just wondering about bookmarks and online link management, and how you do it and how that fits into the building a second brain models that are used in there.
Yeah, good. Interesting question. So it's funny because in some ways the predecessor to what we're doing with the second brain is bookmarks. Like, think about, if any of you are any of you familiar with Delicious, or were any of you Delicious users back in the day? We always have some. Delicious was like the original one that said, you know what, your links, your bookmarks are not just a little, minor feature of your browser. That represents something very precious and important. And so it allowed you to manage these bookmarks and manage these resources. Delicious unfortunately failed or was acquired or something. And we're sort of resurrecting that idea. But what's so interesting, let me share this, is I think it's advanced quite a bit where, so here's my Evernote. So saving only a link is actually not a great solution because links die, right? The company either goes out of business or just changes the URL and suddenly that resource is not accessible. Clipping images is also not ideal because if you like a website, that probably means that you like how they think. And as soon as they update that website and kind of advance their thinking or have a better website, you're not going to get that update. You're going to be stuck with a version from whenever you saved it. So the Evernote Web Clipper, which I think is one of the most powerful features of it, has a really good kind of middle ground, which is, let me find it here. What's an example? Is this one? Okay, here's an example. So this was done using the Evernote Web Clipper, which is a little icon that sits right here in your browser. So you just hit that. You can decide on an article, simplified article, full page, screenshot, whatever you want. So I typically do full page. And then it saves it in this format. So you kind of have the best of both worlds. You have the full images, which is nice because you can search it, you can bold it, you could add your own, comment. This is your document. You own it. You can change it. But also, it automatically saves the link right here. So often what I'll do is this will come up in a search or come up in this kind of visual view, and I'll go, oh, this is actually super relevant to what I'm doing. And I'll quickly look through the images, but then I'll go, you know what, but I want to see the most recent version. So let me click here. So this one looks pretty similar, but sometimes the current version looks completely different. So you have both the current version and one-click access to the current version. I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of
that's really useful. Yeah, that little app. So I guess kind of a quick follow-up is in conjunction with this. I'm sure this might be part of the course, but how do you do tagging? Is that something that you use to organize the links, or do you just search for it with text? I kind of just wondering in general about organizing and being able to find them. Does that? Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So let me give you a couple things that you can look into. The very first thing I ever wrote on this whole subject was about tagging, and it was kind of my rant about tagging. So if you can take a look at that article I just put in the chat, but I think basically my philosophy is using tagging as your primary organizing system, as the primary way that you organize is deeply flawed for reasons that I described in that article, but it's good as a kind of supplementary thing. And then I wrote this article much more recently, which is kind of like since tagging I don't think is a good general solution, it is good in very specific use cases. So I wrote this second article as a kind of description of I think the 4 or 5 situations where I think it is justified. I'm not going to get super into it now, but those are kind of my things.
That's great. Thanks.
Anyone else? I looked at the chat here, but anyone else? I don't see any hands raised, but anyone else want to unmute themselves? Oh, Jeff, actually.
Hey, Tiago. I wonder if you could expand a little bit on the community. Again, you mentioned briefly, you've got a private forum. There's obviously a Facebook group. The alumni are coming in or maybe not coming in, depending on what the situation is. How active is it? What kind of stuff goes on within that? How does it supplement the course itself? Those kinds of things.
Yeah, community, it's so interesting because community is absolutely everything. But sometimes the most important thing is so important you don't actually talk about it directly because it's like too important somehow. Really creating the best community on this topic, on the topic of knowledge management, note taking, and the second brain is my North Star. Every decision I make is made with that in mind. And the way I think of it is the community is the thing that's impossible to replicate in other ways, right? Like content is completely commodified. You know, you can go on YouTube, find anything you want. You can find any free blog post, but community is not something that you can just buy for $2.99 on some website. So I think of the course almost just as like, it's like the training program. It's like the onboarding for how to be part of our community. You know, because to participate effectively, you need certain terminology. You need to know what people are talking about. It helps to have some kind of common background. So the community, so I think of the community in 3 layers. The core of it is the online forum, which is the only thing that you have to pay to access, right? So that's where I spend most of my time. That's where I'm answering questions in depth. That's where people post homework. I know often people need privacy for their homework because you're posting your project list, your tasks, your ideas. You know, you need some level of privacy. And the cool thing about Discourse, which is the platform that we use, it's completely owned and controlled by us. It's not a Facebook group. It's not something else. It's not closed source. It's open source by us. We have the best security, the best like everything. And so that's never gonna be, you know, sold off to some company. But then there's 2 other layers, which is the Slack. And we started this because people wanted something that was a little bit faster. So this is the Forte Labs Slack channel, and you can see on the left we have channels for many, many different topics. Some of them are closed, some are open. But this is the Building a Second Brain channel. And you can see people talk about really specific things. They ask more logistical questions about the exercises. They ask about moving from Notion to Bear, all sorts of different things. And honestly, I'm in here quite frequently, but by the time I get to something, it almost always has multiple responses, which I think is ideal, right? Like my point of view is only one point of view. So that's the second layer. But Slack still has some friction, right? You have to create an account, you have to join my Slack, you have to check the notifications, which is why we started the Facebook group, which I kind of think of as like the outermost, most public layer of the community. Here it is, it's completely free to join. We have almost 900 members after just a couple months. So it's still kind of getting on its feet, but already fairly active. I post case studies. I do this random note of the day thing. So once a day I post a note from my collection and a small explanation of why I find it useful. Some days I miss, but most days I do that. So that's kind of my thinking on community. And the community is over 1,400 strong. Like think about where in the internet, much less the physical world, you would ever find 1,400 people who have dedicated this amount of time, attention, and money to something like personal knowledge management. To me, that's the priceless thing. Everything else is in service of that.
Awesome, thanks. That helps actually.
Cool. Anyone else? Let's see, any hands? Yosef, was that from before, or did you have something else?
I had another one, but if I heard somebody else talking actually. So
yeah, I have a question. Are there some tips to, let's say, to process information from audio podcasts? I listen to a lot of podcasts and I think they're very much information, but they have a problem to, review the information basically. I listen it, I get inspired, and then information goes away.
Yeah, this is one of the hot topics right now. And we have this thread, which is one of the most active threads. It's not the only one, but we have multiple ones just with ideas. So the takeaway is there's not one great solution. People have been posting here about, I just saw one, where was that? OTranscribe, Rev, Tetra, Kogi. There's a ton of interesting experiments, but I'd say no like very clear, obvious solution. And they range from completely manual, pause the thing, take out the app, write it down and play, all the way to like quite sophisticated machine learning, natural language processing things that people have tried doing. It depends a lot on how much friction you're willing to put up with, how important what you're writing down is, how you're going to use it. There's different factors. And by the way, this is why I love this community thing. Touching on the previous point is so important, is there's always more topics than I can conceivably touch on. right? If you look here, I mean, it quickly goes off the rails in the best possible way. People talk about how to save tweet storms, auto-transcribing YouTube videos, what language they should take their notes in, PDFs, work cycles, which is this idea from this other company, questions about spaced repetition. It's like the range of things that we're able to touch on and have intelligent discussions about is 100 times larger. It's actually 1,400 times larger, because it's not just me. I don't consider myself the central point of insights. Otherwise, it would be a very poor experience. These are all the threads. Yeah. Does that help?
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, audio is still kind of, in evolution. The forum is only for our 2 live courses, which is Building a Second Brain and Rite of Passage. There is a section of it for Praxis members, which is my blog subscription, but that is only limited to essentially the commenting for my blog post is on the forum. So we can have like identity and verification and stuff. Otherwise, comments just becomes all these spammers and links and things. So with the exception of that one little section, it's only for students, yes. And there's a wall between them. So Praxis members cannot see all the student stuff.
Hey, Tiago, can you hear me?
Yeah, Asif.
Hey, I had a question for you. If we get the course, I just got the course and signed up. You said the next cohort in March. If we wanted to dive right in, how do you recommend we go through it self-paced, or should we follow along with the forums from the past, or should we just wait until March? How do you recommend getting into it now and not waiting until March?
Yeah, you could wait until March, but you'll have immediate access to everything because for the past 3 years, or 2 years, it's been a self-paced course. So essentially what is happening tomorrow is the self-paced version is turning off. But if you purchase before midnight tomorrow, you could do the entire thing as fast as you want. I'm going to, because we've had so many people join, there's been a few hundred join or a couple hundred join in the past month or two. I'm going to do something, I'm not sure, either a video or maybe a live Zoom call to kind of orient people. And I'll show you kind of how to go through it and the main pieces. In fact, that reminds me, I should do the guided tour since we have 13 minutes left. I mean, this is more or less what I'll show you in the video, but let's close all this stuff. Okay, so this is the Forte Academy homepage. If you click on My Courses, you'll see all the courses that you're subscribed to. Building a Second Brain is obviously the main curriculum. The media library is, you'll automatically be added to it once you purchase Building a Second Brain, and it kind of has just other random media files. For example, all the recordings for the past cohort. So actually, if you bought today, you could sort of simulate what the cohort is like. If you just go through these recordings, this is a shorter version because now cohorts will be 6 weeks instead of 4, but you'll see kind of what it's like. I have my in-depth case studies. I have the capture library, which is really short little tutorials on how to save the most common things. So that's the media library. And then if you buy the premium edition, this is what you get. This has your 3-month Praxis membership. The Nerd Bundle is my note templates. Here's all the advanced tutorials, and here's all the guest interviews. So with the main curriculum, this is what it looks like. It's pretty straightforward. You watch each lesson, and then you do complete and continue. Digital notes. And it checks off the previous one and takes you to the next one. Often I refer to links below the video, and then here's the slides for every lecture, which are downloadable. So you can download all the slides at full resolution, annotate them, mark them up, save them. And how I would have you do this is basically linearly. I mean, that's the advantage of a curriculum like this. You just go beginning to end. And you'll notice they're broken up into units 1 through 8, interspersed with case studies, which are sort of like practical case studies on what you just learned in the previous unit. We also have student case studies. So how, in this example, this is someone who works in the intelligence community, how they use progressive summarization. There's demos, there's kind of supplementary videos, there's exercises, 10 exercises, which are sort of like the 10 implementation steps of your second brain. What else? Unit 1 is a little boring because it's set up, but basically these are just the things to get into the course. You need to, complete the onboarding survey, register for the online forum, which is just resetting your password, join the Slack channel if you want, download the workbook, which is this 22-page, basically everything you need for the course, including a roadmap, and then a self-assessment and all the different documents that I refer to. So there's a lot, but it's cool with the curriculum that you can just go beginning to end. And anytime you have a problem, you can go in the Slack, in the forum, or just email me. And as I said, I'll have a similar orientation to this one, a little bit better planned, going out probably in the next few days. So that's the curriculum. I think you've already seen the forum. There's a special building a second brain section. It's divided into different categories. And for each of them, it's really just like any other, forum experience. You make a post. You can do embedded links, anything you want. Here's some kind of stats. And then if you have something to say, you reply. And it's cool because you can quote. So let's say you want to refer specifically to this sentence, you can quote them. And on the left is kind of the code version, and then on the right is how it looks. And it has a built-in notification system. For example, you can say, where is that? I think we might have turned that off. Oh no, here it is. So you can say, are you watching this? Do you want to be notified when someone replies? Or do you want to just be normal, which I think is when someone directly replies to you, or do you want to mute it? And I believe Discourse, which is this platform, sends you every week a digest, like the most active posts, the posts you were part of, kind of what's happening on the forum each week. Here's your notifications that you can see different things. What else? Questions and answers. And then I showed you the Slack, which is really just kind of more of a messaging environment. If you just have a quick question or something, often we'll start discussions here. And then once it gets to a certain level of complexity, Slack, it doesn't have the best threading. Threading is just the replies. And so I'll often jump in here and say, hey, everyone, let's move this to the forum where it can actually stand the test of time and be this resource that we come back to again and again. And the cool thing with Slack too is you can join, and I suggest you do, these other channels. If you want to know about the Praxis blog, if you want to know about PCAM in organizations, if you're in marketing, if you want to know announcements, you can individually follow each of these. And then finally is the Facebook group, which, like I said, is still getting started, but is a nice way to kind of, the cool thing about this is you can invite friends that haven't taken the course. Sometimes that you just know people, colleagues, your boss that are just not going to do it, but sending them or inviting them to join a Facebook group is much lower friction. And they can kind of see like all the different ideas we talk about, the interviews I do, like this one, which I'm doing in a week, which is very fun. So I don't know, the general idea is there's many different ways to engage. Everyone kind of engages in the way that's most comfortable to them or to the depth that they want. But I kind of feel like what we're building is something bigger than a course. The course is just the tangible thing, the product, but behind the course is a really engaged, thriving community that I really love and that goes so far beyond what is in a curriculum. So hopefully that is a good guided tour. I'm happy to answer any other questions about it. I currently don't have any cross promotions. We're going to look at this next year, but currently Praxis, which is $10 a month or $100 a year, is completely separate from building a second brain. There's just kind of a lot of complexity in managing a certain number of discounts and bundles and promotions. So currently those are separate. The cohorts are slowly growing over time. The first one was like 50 people. The last one was more like 150. Of course, there's always, this kind of always amazes me, is there's always only a percentage of people that sign up in a given period that join the cohort. So if 200 people officially opt in, the calls will have something more like 100. And sometimes people too, they'll miss certain calls and watch the recordings. I post the recordings within a few hours of the end of each live call. But it's really like, this is kind of what's so interesting about online education is there's no one right way to do it. It's not like in college or something where there was one right way. You go to every class, they measure attendance, you do all the homework, take the tests. That was the correct way. We have people that wait till the very end of the cohort and do the whole thing in 3 days. We have people who follow the first half and then drop off and then join the next cohort for the second half. It's completely non-linear how people choose to engage. I would honestly recommend joining for the full cohort, obviously, but generally cohorts are like 100 people that actually show up. Each call has somewhere between 50 and 100, which is cool because you might think, well, then you don't get any teacher time. But what we really do is breakout rooms. And this is people's favorite things. We spend maybe half the call. I click a button here and you basically get whisked away to different breakout rooms of on average 3 to 4 people for on average 7 to 10 minutes. And sometimes we have a discussion question or prompt. Sometimes we have you do an exercise. Sometimes we have you just, kind of give each other feedback on the homework. But every time we come back, every time we do breakout rooms, people are like, more breakout rooms, because you actually get to connect with a human, which is something that is so rare in online courses. So I'd say we're going to do more and more breakout rooms. And that's something you have to be on the calls to experience.
Thank you.
Dean, no, the Habits course is separate. Like I said, I really don't like piling on the courses. I find these bundles like 25 courses for this amount to be kind of absurd. It's like as if learning is like soybeans. You just buy it by the sack, which I don't think is the case. So I try to focus people's attention on one course at a time. But that's, I think, $50 purchased on its own. I have 3 minutes here. Anyone else want to ask any other question? I think I've more or less touched on everything I see in the chat. So I'm going to have a bonus today. I'll just tell you what it is because you're here. I'm going to do a payment plan. This has been the #1 request. Gotten 100 messages on it, and I was very reluctant because for a number of reasons. One is I don't want it to seem cheaper than it is. It's an expense. It's a financial decision, and I kind of feel like people should make it in full knowledge of the true cost. And also, I have to charge more actually because the default rate is quite high for many different reasons. People change credit cards these days constantly, so I have to charge a premium of $100, which also feels weird. But I'm going to do a 5-month payment plan, and I'm only going to do it for people who have engaged. So you're only going to get that offer if you've been on one of these calls or if you've read one of the things I've sent out over the past week. And the reason for that is I'm just trying to kind of pre-select the people that are most committed, that are showing through their actions that they're really dedicated and committed, rather than just spewing discounts all over the internet, which I think is ultimately a disservice to people. I mean, the big investment here is not money. Even with the new pricing, I'm telling you, it's not money, it's the time. It's a serious time investment. Make no mistake, this is not easy. I try to never use the word easy in any of my marketing. It is not easy to completely change the way you work and just have a revolution in your productivity. It's hard, but it's worth it. That's my philosophy. So make that decision in full awareness. But that said, I know it's a lot of money, and I know there's people in different life situations. So later today, for like a 24-hour window, I will release a payment plan. We won't let you down. Cool. Well, we're at the end of the hour. I think I'm going to log off. Oh, yeah, great reminder here, the time zone. So there's 3 major time zones: Asia, US, or Americas, and Europe. And the way it works is any time that we schedule, one of those time zones gets screwed, right? If it's good for the US and Europe, then Asia, it's the middle of the night. If it's good for Asia and the Americas, it's in the middle of the night for Europe. So what we do is we alternate. Every cohort is scheduled for one of those 2 things. So this past one in October was not European friendly, which means this one in March is going to be European friendly, which means it's going to be morning Pacific time, afternoon Eastern time, and evening European time. So if you're in Asia and that's really hard for you, then you're going to have to wait until next fall, unfortunately. Although, of course, it's funny, even with that scheduling, close to 1/3 of each cohort is still the time zone that it's the middle of the night. This always amazes me. People get up at 3 in the morning, or they watch the recording soon after it ends because I send it out, and they just keep up. Because besides the Zoom calls, everything else is asynchronous, meaning everything else can be done whenever you want. And you do lose out a little bit of the interaction in the breakout rooms, but ultimately you still have much of the experience. Amazing. Well, thank you, everyone. I'll send out this recording and the email with the payment plan, everything within an hour. And I just really thank you for being here. I know it takes a lot to carve out an hour from your schedule. And I just hope you'll just make the commitment to just get it done. Build that second brain. It really is possible. It's a feasible thing to achieve. And draw on me. I'm available as a resource. Takes me a day or 2 to respond to things generally, but I will get back to you. And I'm super open to suggestions. Every part of this course has changed based on feedback. You know, even with this pre-designed curriculum, at least 30% of every cohort is completely different. We do these hard pivots, changing every little element based on what you guys need, because we design the cohort based on the people in the cohort. Like, you're the people we're serving. We design it around you. So feedback is really what we thrive on. So don't be a stranger. Buy the course if it's the right decision for you within the next day and a half, preferably. And I will see you online. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.